Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. I seek refuge in the Buddha. I seek refuge in the Dharma. I seek refuge in the Sangha. We have Buddha's birthday coming up, Friday, 5th March. And May. Thank you. See his thrilling words. Let my body dry up on the seat. Let my skin, flesh, and bones wither away. I shall not move from the seat without attaining the immeasurable enlightenment, which is difficult to attain in many cycles of creation. Yasane shushatu me shariram tvakastimansam pralayanstayatu aprapya bodhim bahu kalpa durlabam naivasanat kaya matasya lipyate. Let us quietly meditate on that light, the immeasurable light within us. And also reflect on the tremendous willpower that Buddha exerted. Ajnanatimire loke pradurбhuta pradipakaha namostu bodhisattvaya sambuddhaya namo namaha. One who is the light, dispelling the darkness of ignorance. I seek refuge in that immeasurable Buddha. He, as Swami Vivekananda says, he was the sanest man that was ever born. That man set in motion the highest moral ideas any nation can have. And wherever there's a moral code, it is a ray of light from that man. His search for the path to overcome suffering was not just done for himself, but for humanity. So Buddhism, as it's so called now, was historically a very important religion coming out of India, because it left its imprint on Asia and the whole world. It changed culture and the history of the whole of Asia. It's one of the most tremendous religious movements that the world has ever seen. And they went about it with simply their moral strength and their philosophical acumen. Unlike other movements that went around with fire and sword. This was the inspiration, the man. And he didn't want to be called a god. Saying, I'm a man amongst men. 400 years have passed since Buddha was born. And he has continued to inspire people to the way of blessedness. Yeah. He was one of my heroes. We grew up listening to his tales and stories, and it's all over the place. So we'll go first to the measurable Buddha, the one which was historically delineated. But since he was so towering, myths and legends and stories all accumulated around this person. It's obvious. So he was born in the clan of the Shakyas. There's a clan in North India called the Shakyas. So he was called a Shakya Muni, the sage of the Shakyas. He was also born in the ancient lineage of the sage Gautama. So he was named also Gautama. His given name was Siddhartha, one whose aim has been attained. So we have Siddhartha Gautama, Gautama Buddha, etc. So Encyclopedia of Religions says about him, the greatest ever to have lived on this earth and who influenced the life and thought of more than half the human race. Because of the nobility of his character, the vastness of his vision, the depth of his compassion, and the profundity of his teachings. This has made him what he is today. One of the greatest embodied ones that has ever walked on this earth. His traditional life is called a Lalita Vistara. It's an ancient life, but it was written much later, after he passed away. So he was born on, exact date is 568 before Common Era. Swami Vivekananda says, imagine the culture in those days, that he studied and discussed the vast philosophical literature of his times. It's also called, his birthday is also called a thrice blessed day, because he was born on that full moon. Now it's called a Buddha Purnima. He also attained nirvana on that same day, the same full moon day. And he attained the final, it's called parinirvana, on that same day. So he was born, he attained liberation, and he passed away on that same day. So it's a thrice blessed day. So he was born in the royal house of the king Shuddhodana, and his mother, she was Maya Devi. Maya. He was more like a kind of a small chieftain, not a king. It was a small kingdom, which is now in Nepal. He married when he was 19 to Yashodhara. She was also a princess of the Koliya clan. So they used to marry amongst themselves for obvious reasons, military, etc. purposes. So when his mother was pregnant, she used to have various visions of the future glory of the child. At times she was delighted, at times she was perplexed. And she used to get all these fortune tellers and soothsayers to interpret some of those dreams and the visions. And as it was in the old days, the girl used to go back to her parents' house to give birth. In those days, of course, there were no maternity hospitals and all that. So she was on her way, and she felt the birth pangs, and she gave birth to the child in a beautiful, you can say, forested area called Lumbini. That is also now what is called Nepal. And after 3 days, he passed away. He was brought up by Mahaprajapati. She was his aunt. And ultimately, she married the king, Shuddhodana. She too was very noble. So when he was born, he was brought here to the palace. There was joy as well as there was grief, because mother had passed away. And the king invited the sages and yogis and etc. to bless the child. And when they saw the child, some of them knew, some of them never knew, and they were astounded. Oh my God. They were saying, this will be a great person. He will move people's minds. But the king was, will he be a great ruler? No, he will rule people's minds and hearts. And, so all of them predicted that he will be the light of the world. And Edwin Arnold, when he wrote the first biography in English of Buddha, he named it the light of the world, light of Asia. There was one old sage who, they say, was waiting for a redeemer, a child like this, to be born. And he was old, and then when he saw that child, he takes him in his arms and he starts weeping. It's for this that I have been waiting for so long. Now I can safely pass away. I know that the world is safe, philosophically safe. So his horoscope was drawn, and then the astrologer said, this guy has a tendency to just leave the world. You have to keep him engaged. And that's what the king tried to do. He built a separate palace, and in that there was song and dance and music, etc. Keep this guy engaged. But like all children of those royal families, he was brought up in that culture, military. He was trained in all the weapons of that time. He used to regularly exercise, and he was also, I say, skilled in administrative duties. He also was trained in that royal code of honor. So it was this training that this boy was now getting. He also, when he was young, he used to meet a lot of wise men and discuss with them philosophical subjects, which, of course, the father didn't like. When he was just a child, I think 4 or 5, there was there's a harvest festival and a sowing festival, which the kings and the queens and all used to go and use the first sickle or sow the first seeds. And he was found sitting quietly, immersed in deep meditation. And when they found him, they said, "What are you doing?" "Nothing. I was just sitting quietly." I said, "The morning shows the day." So as he grew up, as I said, he married at 19, and they had a son called Rahul. So the traditional story goes that he was sick of all this kind of the palatial, you can say, comforts and all. He used to go out now and then outside the palace gates, but always under guard and always under a royal entourage. That is, they used to go around and clean the streets, clean everything, keep all the ugly and other people out of the way so that he might not see them. But one night he went out with his charioteer and he saw, as they say, an old man, bent, with holding a staff. So he asked, "What is this?" The charioteer says, "My lord, this is the fate of every embodied being. There's nothing surprising." And they say a glimmer started shining in his mind. And they saw, after a while, a man lying down, sick, saying, "What's that?" "This is sickness, my lord. This is the dharma, this is the nature of the physical body." And he was now perturbed. And after a while, a little further on, they say, they see a man being taken to the cremation grounds. "What is this?" "Death, my lord. This is the nature of all embodied beings." And he was troubled. He returned and he couldn't sleep. How does one solve this? So, he started asking questions. In the meantime, his wife, Yashodhara, she's depicted as always in the shadows, quiet. She was never like that. Male writers. But she too was very enlightened, and she used to go around the city. It was called Kapilavastu. And she used to do some social work. She used to go to the homeless, and she used to go to the poor and the needy. She used to take clothes and food, etc. And he wanted to discuss these things, what he saw. Yeah, this is known. I go now and then. Say, "I like to go along with you." And he used to accompany his wife. They used to go late in the evenings, and she used to go take help, what was needed for the people there she was visiting. So this was the beginning of his compassion also. His inquiry now was kind of joined to his great compassion. And he wanted to see how can we elevate human life. See, until and unless you don't understand life, you don't know its value, your life is useless and other people's lives also useless. But once you start understanding the value of your own life, then everything around becomes valuable. It becomes meaningful. So this is how the remainder of those days after he had a big shock was spent. And there's a very touching scene when he decided to leave. He was then 29. And he was torn between the love of his wife and his young child and the kingdom, etc. And then whether to give it all up and go in search of truth. And as he was thinking about these things, his wife had kept a cloak, a traveler's cloak and shoes, etc., ready for him. She was also intuitive. This guy is going to leave one day. So he also was comforted with that. He wore his traveler's robes, shoes, etc. And he looks, both of them were sleeping, his wife and his son. She was awake. She pretended to sleep. And he looked longingly at them. And then he left because his heart could not be contained with just one family and one kingdom. The whole world was waiting for him for answers. So for 6 years, he went around trying to learn from teachers. The first year he went to the teacher called Alara Kalama. He was now what is called Rajgir in Bihar. The state of Bihar in India has come from the word Vihar. That's a Buddhist monastery. So this first teacher was well versed in the Sankhya philosophy. He studied under him, wasn't very satisfied. Then he came under another teacher. He was Uddhaka Ramaputra. And he taught him some more. But he was a very stern ascetic. Buddha also never liked it. And then he left. He left him and wandered on his own. He's saying, I'll have to seek the truth myself. It's not that he had not attained the lower forms of truth. He did. He was just that waiting for a kind of that final breakthrough. So he went, he traveled, he used to eat just 1 grain of rice per day. He had gradually reduced it. He had 5 friends, and one day Buddha had a little extra food, and those other guys saying, he has fallen. And the story goes that he was so weak, he swooned and fell. There was a girl who was going to worship some of the gods in those forests, and she saw a monk fainted there. So she had that porridge milk made of milk, and she feeds him, and he eats that. And after he eats that, he's fortified. And then he says also, he speaks about a middle path. You should not be too austere, not too indulgent also. Seek the middle path. And then he sat down with those great words, let my body wither away and skin and flesh and bones. I'm not going to get up from this place until I reach enlightenment. So his teachings were simple. After he attained enlightenment, we'll come down to that later. So he said, clear, there is suffering, dukkhamasti, it's very clear. There's a cause of suffering, then there is a means to end suffering, and the means are this. So he gave the 8-fold path of right knowledge, right perception, right work, right thought, right feeling, everything right. So this was the 4-fold truths called the 4-fold truths of the Aryans, or we call Aryan. Arya Chaturva Arya Satyani. This is the truth of all embodied beings. So Swami Vivekananda says, the teacher, that Buddha, wanted to make the truth shine as truth. No softening, no compromise, no pandering to the priests, the powerful or the kings, no bowing down before superstitious traditions, however ancient. He worked out the moral side of Vedanta. He simplified his teachings to reach the common people. This was what he did. And he always asserted that you don't need to go crawling in front of these gods and all. Okay? Depend on your own strength. And you have that strength. And he tried to awaken that confidence and the strength in people. And he traveled the length and breadth of North India, mainly on the Indo-Gangetic plains, and he preached. And thousands of monks and lay people also gathered around him. And we have a very touching story when he was asked, what about the women? Aren't they eligible for this? Saying, wait for a while. They don't need to come in. And then his foster mother, that is his aunt who brought him up, and she and his wife say, we want to be nuns. What do you have to say for it? Now he was caught. What they did was, first they sent their son, Rahul. He had grown up now, saying, that's your father. Saying, oh, that's my father. He was called a lion amongst the sages. They're saying, go, ask your inheritance from your father. So they saw that this father was going around with a begging bowl, the monk's begging bowl. Said, give me my inheritance. So he couldn't deny it. He made him a monk. Then his wife and his foster mother came, give us our inheritance. So he was Buddha was prodded by one of his chief disciples called Ananda, saying, no, they should come in. And that was the beginning of the proper women's monasticism. That was around 2,300 years, a little more than that. That women's monasticism was begun there. There were these ancient Vedic women's sages, but there was no proper form. So he was also the first to organize the monks and to organize also the women's monastic, you can say, orders. So this was his simple teachings. Simple. There is something called, now he preached something called nirvana, as the cessation of all problems. So what is nirvana? People have said it's an unconditioned state. It is nothing but an extinguishing of one's own self, the self which is false. Really? Saying yes, because he preached the doctrine of the anatman, that is, there is no soul. There is no such thing as an individual soul at all. So what do we have? It's just a matter of combinations. And he laid his philosophy, actually his teachings, later on his disciples wrote this philosophy on the doctrine of pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. Everything is a compound. And what is a compound will disintegrate. And there's a chain of causation. And he laid down the chain of causation, saying that gives the illusion of the self as a separate entity. There is no self. While the word nirvana itself was nothing but, he borrowed it from the Vedanta. They used to call it the Brahma Nirvana, the extinguishing of oneself in Brahman. So always an analogy of a lamp is given. The lamp burns. Well, the lamp burns because there's oil. And when the oil is run out, the lamp will get extinguished. But it's okay. But what feeds that oil? Who pours that oil? Your desires. That he called it the thirst to seek outside objects. So this thirst, it's a kill that thirst. But it will kill the man. There is no man. There is no soul at all. So he laid his foundations on the real nature of a person. He analyzed it. The next thing he did was he opened religion for everybody. Saying, everybody come in. He never taught in Sanskrit, which was the language of the cultured and the learned. He spoke in the ordinary language. So he got a lot of people along with him. So that is, in brief, Buddha's life. And they say when he was on the cusp of enlightenment, they think that is a great story. Mara, that it depicted as a devil, not a devil, as a tempter or something like that. So he is the manifestation of death, disease, and desire. He comes to tempt him. And they say that he sent his 5 daughters. These are just projections of stories that when you're on the cusp of enlightenment, nature throws out its best forms in order to distract the yogi. So the story goes that his clear insight dispelled all these illusions. Like he saw space curling up and expanding. And then he saw fire. These are daughters. They came, one girl comes, she dances, and he sees, he's sitting down under the Bodhi tree. And then fire, the daughter called Fire comes, and she burns everything down. The fire reaches up almost to where he's sitting down. The daughter called Water comes, and she lashes the whole universe with water, almost flooding everything. And the water reaches up where he was seated. And then the earth comes, and she brings in all the earthquakes and the volcanoes, etc. So all these 5 forms, the 5 elements come, try to distract him. He wasn't distracted. At last, Mara himself comes. So Buddha had his eyes closed. You know, I remember I was sitting under the descendant of that same tree which Buddha sat down. Oh my God. And we are thinking of all these things. So Buddha was sitting down like that and meditating. And then he opened his eyes and he saw his own form outside. That other Buddha smiled at him. And the original Buddha, what's this? So there's a beautiful dialogue. So he's saying that illusory Buddha says, you, my Lord, you go where no one else has gone. Will you take me along? Buddha calmly says, finally, I have met you. You will not build this house again. This house is in the body. The illusory Buddha says, but I am your home. I am you. You live in me. How can you not let me come along? Buddha said, oh, you God of my false self, you are pure illusion. You do not exist. And Buddha uses his insight and banishes it. Then touching the earth, he says, let the earth be my witness. And the illusory Buddha, he transformed himself in that old hideous form of Mara, yells and weeps and departs. Then he attains that illumination. So he was immersed in that bliss for days and days. They say when he came out of it, came out of that deep meditation, he walked sleepless for 7 days up and down. Those places are still there marked. Well, we don't really know for sure. But that bliss was so much, and then the gods, they all came. Now that you have known, go and preach it out to the world. He looks out at the world and says, I don't see anyone who is competent. So the gods said, no, no, you have come for this task. Dilute it a little. You teach it. And again he looks out at the world. No. But then his great compassion kicks in. He sees the suffering of people and he says, yeah, well, okay, I'll go. Then from Bodh Gaya, from where he attained illumination, which is called, it was already a sacred place. He comes to Varanasi. And then from there he goes to Sarnath, which is a beautiful place. And he preaches the first sermon. And those 5 friends of his who had said, Buddha has fallen down when he had eaten, he's saying, oh my God, this person looks different. Who is he? Oh, he is a Gautama. And he preaches to them this new doctrine. And that is the time they say that the wheel of dharma he spins it. That's why you find Buddhists, they spin that wheel, you know. They touch the wheel. There's the kind of long wheel and they keep. That Buddha has started Dharma Chakra Pavartana. So this is, and for 80 years, till he was 80, he lived and preached. And he was, as I say, a new religion it was, Swami Vivekananda says, it was a fulfillment of Hinduism. Working out the moral side of the religion. So he gave up his body again on that same full moon day at Vaishali. And everybody is crying. The whole earth is, as it were, mourning and weeping because he is going to depart. And then he says, what you do is saying, know that you have to be a light for oneself. Be your own light. Saying Atma Deepo Bhava. And this is what it is. Depend on your own strength. And you have the strength, depend on it. So even till the last moment when he was passing away, there were people coming to see him, and his disciples were trying to obstruct them, but he said, no, let them come in. They have to see the final measurable Buddha, because he knew he was immeasurable. So he passed away. He gave up his body. It's called Mahaparinirvana, when he emerged. Now, what is that state? That cannot be described, but an experience of that state was spoken about by one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples in Sarnath. So Swami Vijnanananda had gone to Sarnath. And Sarnath, as I say, there was the deer park, and they gave you the first sermon. And now there's a lot of excavation going on. So he saw, he's saying, I'll read this. Arriving there on foot, I looked around. While I was there, the guide informed me that there was a stone image containing the carvings of the Buddha's entire life story, from his birth to death. While I was looking at the image, I had a wonderful vision. I saw a formless ocean of light, and the whole universe was gradually merging into it. Like a speck, I was watching that blissful glow with wonder, standing on the shore of that ocean of light. I was beside myself. Then in the twinkling of an eye, the universe completely disappeared. And from the ocean of pure consciousness, the compassionate, loving form of Buddha appeared. What a joy. And he was in that state, and for 3 days he had that kind of experience of that bliss. So here he says, what is the state of Buddha? Now Buddha is a person. We have seen what it was. But he always insisted Buddha is a state. It's a state of consciousness. It's not a man, it's not a person, but it is a state. And when we say we want to attain to that Buddha consciousness, it is this immeasurable consciousness. So he said, like a speck, I was watching that blissful glow with wonder, that the entire universe was merging in the ocean of light. You know, Sri Ramakrishna also had a similar vision. Everything was merging into that ocean of light. The same Swami Vijnanananda, when he went to the Vishwanath temple in Kashi, that's one of the famous temples. So he came saying, why am I come here to look at a stone? And then the same vision opened up, showing that there is an immeasurable ocean of consciousness. And this universe, we make such a big thing out of it, is nothing but a chimera, it's an illusion. There's nothing to it. Now, what gives substance to this? Your own sense of self, which is ultimately a false self. It is not real. And Vedanta also says your real self is different from what is your self, what you think now. Swami Vivekananda has given in a Jnana Yoga class called the real and the apparent man. So we are the apparent self, and the real self is this. So like a speck, I was watching that blissful glow with wonder, standing on the shore of that ocean of light. This is the Buddha. And so is this the person, the images, etc., do they contain some measure of that immeasurable? Yes, there's a Buddha there, the statue there. Swami Vijnananda, again, he had gone to what is called Myanmar, Yangon. So he says, he went to see the famous reclining image of Buddha at Pegu, 45 miles from the old Rangoon. He said, today, Lord Buddha has graciously vouchsafed me his vision. I clearly saw that the reclining image of Buddha was living, as it were. How magnificent was the beauty of his luminous form. So, that immeasurable Buddha, the light, is reflected in the measurable. So, all of us contain that light within us, and hold on to that light, and it will lead you to that immeasurable state of being. This is the Buddha, the person and the principle. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, time for questions. Yeah.
Is there any sort of origin story about Buddha? You know, the way that we talk about with Vivekananda, who is one of the great yogis, the 7 great yogis, and Ramakrishna came down, like, you know, was he a great bodhisattva in the past, and or
there. You know, as Buddhism spread right from Alexandria to Japan. Everything was just, the Buddha's teachings are spread. In India itself, there were a lot of, you can say, there were about 25 schools, philosophical schools, each disputing with each other. They were broadly then into 5 divisions. Then what happened was, there was the northern school and the southern school, etc. In India, what happened was, saying we found that there's so much confusion, philosophical confusion, religious confusion. Buddha preached no God, but they made him a god. He preached against all organization, but they made everything organized. So they completely went against what he really thought. So what Hindus did was, okay, the best solution. They made him one of the avatars. He's the 9th avatar. So he is, as they say, an avatar. So divine origins. But of course, don't tell that to the common. So our avatars started from the fish, the first evolutionary, you can say, life, sensible life, as I say, was a fish. And then there was a kind of the second one was a tortoise, because it could live both in the water and amphibious, on the land. Then there was a terrestrial, the boar, etc., etc. We started from there, a few million years there, and we have now ended with the Buddha, 9th. The 10th one is yet to come. Hold on there. So there are these souls that repeatedly come for the good of humanity. So we can take it. However, there is, there are a lot of tales called the Jataka tales. Now this is from the Hindu standpoint we are talking about. Jataka tales. So Buddha, he saw his own past lives. And there are he enumerated 500 of them. And in each 500 of his lives, he takes one story. And so he said, I was evolving these 500 births till I came here to the Buddha. That was, so your origin. We have also undergone many births, don't worry. Okay, there's our Buddha. How was Buddha so sure about enlightenment and its possibilities that he was ready to give up his body and life for it? Oh, enlightenment means you are sure. There's no doubt about it. It is knowledge. If you are not sure, my God, what's the use in trying to get enlightenment? You don't know, you're not sure. So, as the experienced Swami Vijnanananda says, that he felt like a small speck on the edge of the ocean of light. That is what you will feel. That is what Buddha felt, like a small speck on the ocean of light. So the body is just a small speck. Why? The earth itself is a small speck. If you doubt me, just go outside. Go out into interstellar space and you'll say, no, that's a speck. And what a big mess we have done of these things. Our perception of life and the world and everything will completely change. So, in this small speck of dust, what a big show we have made. And so, it doesn't matter. So, he was ready to give up his body and life for it. That is the hero. Okay. So, okay. Yeah.
The teachings of Vedanta and Buddhism, they seem quite similar, but so what is the difference in the two?
Well, the question is, what's the difference between Vedanta and Buddhism? There was no Buddhism before and there was no Hinduism. These are just a few century old, you can say, words. So, to put it simply, Buddhism is Vedanta without God. Okay? That's it. In fact, Shankaracharya was often, you can say, accused of being a hidden Buddhist, Prachanna Buddha. Because in Buddhism also there is a doctrine of Maya, Vedanta also. But the doctrine of Maya has come from the old Rig Veda. Indra Maya vi Pururupa iyate. So it's an old doctrine. Then they kept on developing. Nagarjuna and all this. So what is Vedanta? But they, since they discarded all other scriptures, they made their philosophical structure so watertight. Their psychology is so watertight, you cannot break it. Because they had to, they had no scriptures to fall back on. Or no authority, no other authority. You can understand yourself. So today is a lot of, on the YouTube and all these like atheistic arguments, a lot of atheists, there's no God and there's this and that. And against every kind of theological beliefs. I look at them and smile. I think these were more than 2,300-year-old arguments, 400 years. Buddha has used them, and for thousands of years, the Buddhist sages, they have used the same arguments. Today, these guys think they are original. Nothing is original. So the best arguments, Buddhistic arguments, were leveled against the ideas of a personal God and gods and that's it. So though they had dismissed, Buddhism had dismissed all the gods and all, yet we find them, those gods, quietly making their entry and say, yeah, he had dismissed all the heavens, etc. And slowly again the heavens also come in. Especially in the northern, you can say, Buddhism, we have all this. The word Amitabha Buddha is that it means that immeasurable Buddha, immeasurable light. So there's a human need for clinging on to something. So humanity has to still come up to the level of what Buddha had preached. So now people are meditating according to the Buddhism and Vipassana and all. He had given all those things long time ago. So that is it. So what is Vedanta? Okay. We had Brahma Nirvana and they simply had Nirvana. So when the Vedantis asked then, how is, after he attained Nirvana, how did he retain his body? Oh, that is, they use a term, Sopadi Shesha Nirvana. That is Nirvana with a slight remainder. And then when you finally give it up, Nirupadi Shesha. So when you've given up everything, they're saying that's what we call a Jivan Mukta, living free. So if Buddha would have simply merged in that ocean of light and never would have emerged, then you wouldn't have all this philosophy. So just a few, sometimes semantic differences are there.
So in the, like in the Vedanta, there is the soul, the Atman and the Brahman. That is not there in Buddhism, right?
No. But that Atman is that Brahman. Remember that. When you go in searching of your own Atman, you will not find your Atman. You will find that Brahman. In that way, Vedanta also is dismissing the false self.
So if all sort of external images and phenomena are illusory, can you explain a bit more about how they still contain the light of truth? Because you were saying that the image of the Buddha still contains part of the light, but you're also saying that Buddha destroyed his image as part of awakening. So can you talk a bit more about that?
Nice question. So if everything is kind of illusory, how can that immeasurable light, which is the real Buddha, can be reflected in the illusory image? Yes, Buddhism said everything is an illusion. Vedanta said within the illusion is the real. Because Vedanta, you can give the example of you have a snake. You see a snake and you get terrified. Then we go closer, oh, it's not a snake, it's a rope. So that illusion has to be stationed on something. The substratum is called. You will not see an illusion here and it's a substratum there. You have to see both together. That which you're seeing as a kind of a light is the real light, the substratum. Now you'll say, why does it appear like this? That is because of the false self. You're seeing it. You are experiencing that immeasurable Buddha, but through a kind of a prism. And that's what you're seeing. Oh, it's a kind of... So that's why these images, etc., they contain that light, the light of this. Now, it's only the Buddha's image? No, all images itself.
Is it because the light is consciousness?
Oh, yes, yes.
You're looking at it. The light's like coming from, well, I guess it's partly coming from you, but it's also coming from everything.
Everything. I remember the monk. We were young, we used to go to him and we were asking him, what is this temple and this worship? And we were not interested in that, temple and worship and all these things. Even I wasn't interested, but I was made to do puja when I was young. He's telling us about it. And one day he was worshipping in the temple and he saw Sri Ramakrishna's statue becoming more and more luminous and the light coming out of it, about to enter into him. He said, wait. It will become a big confusion, big row. All the people are sitting down there. They might see that I fainted. Wait. And the light retracted. And then he finished his worship. And then after he finished, he sat down. Okay, now. Nothing happened. I said, what a fool I was. So it's like that. The light is everywhere. The light is everywhere. Like Sri Ramakrishna says, some water is used for drinking, some used for washing clothes and etc. Especially in India, you have some water is used for worship only and some water. So it's all one, but certain water or certain light is more manifest in certain forms. So what happens is, it's more also when you worship that form over and over again, you're impinging your consciousness on that. So that image is sandwiched between the substratum and your own consciousness. So at times it gives away. There are people who, in fact, for many years he lived in San Francisco, Swami Ashokananda. He's saying, if there is Brahman everywhere, I must be able to see it. And he tried to see it with his eyes open. And slowly he persisted and persisted. And he broke through. He could see it. So there's that light. So always remember that illusory phenomena is always situated above the real. You will not see the snake there and the rope there. They're always together. So that which was appearing as a snake is actually the rope. When you go close or bring the light, oh, that's what happens. Okay. So when you say Buddha was not a man but a state, should we take that statement as a philosophical stance of the Buddha, for the Buddha only, or can we transfer the meaning to other element souls? Yes, you can transfer the meaning to other element souls also. The word Buddha comes from the word bodh. Bodh means to awaken, to understand, enlightenment, knowledge. It comes from the word buddhi. Buddhi. The buddhi is the intellect. and the bodh is the enlightened intellect, the intellect which has become illumined. So, Gayatri mantra is they pray, may my intellect be enlightened. They don't pray for anything else. They pray for intelligence. They don't pray to this God and that God. Make me more intelligent. That's what. So yes, you can call it if you say it's Christ consciousness, it's the same thing. Christ was not is a person, and yet Christ consciousness is that unlimited. Rama consciousness or Ram Krishna consciousness is the same thing. Okay, just semantics. Yes, so thank you very much. As the announcements, Wednesday we have a gospel reading 7 p.m. Fridays at 7 p.m. we have the householder disciples of Ramakrishna. And next Sunday, Brother Jim, Swami Brahmatmananda, he will continue his series on Sri Ramakrishna's hymns. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.